Chapter 2, Paragraph 11 of the Jehovah's Witness publication, Revelation, its Grand Climax at Hand, claims that, for some 4,000 years, Jehovah progressively revealed to obedient God-fearing humans details related to the coming of the seed. That is, the offspring of what they call God's woman, which they believe God refers to in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, and is seen giving birth in Revelation chapter 12. Progressive revelation is the belief that God reveals truth to humanity gradually, over time, rather than all at once. The idea appears implicitly in the way the Hebrew scriptures unfold. Later texts reinterpret or expand on earlier ones. For example, the covenant with Abraham builds on Noah. The law of Moses develops Israel's identity further, and the prophets reinterpret Torah in light of Israel's failures. Jehovah's Witnesses' argument depends on taking diverse texts and retrofitting them into a single theological narrative about a seed that is progressively revealed over 4,000 years. From a scholarly perspective, however, this is not how those texts function in their own contexts. When bringing up the subject of progressive revelation, paragraph 11 refers to Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 to 10, which is a classic text often used in discussions of progressive revelation. It reads, "Remember the former things of long ago, that I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is no one like me. From the beginning I foretell the outcome, and from long ago the things that have not yet been done. I say my decision will stand, and I will do whatever I please." Christian interpretations stretch this passage beyond its context, so that God was perceived as having planned salvation from the beginning and fulfilled it in Christ. In later theology, especially among groups like Jehovah's Witnesses, this text is taken as a sweeping statement that God reveals his purposes gradually, yet consistently, from Genesis to Revelation. Reading the text in context, Isaiah chapter 46, verses 1 to 7 gives an example for contrast. Some scholars see echoes of the Akitu festival here. This was the New Year festival where the city god of Babylon, Marduk, was celebrated. Gods were paraded through the streets, carried by the people or animals. Other scholars tend to see this as just a polemic against idols. Carrying the gods is described as a burden rather than a joyful celebration, and the gods are mocked for not being able to do anything for the worshipers that call on them. In contrast, God describes himself as being able to carry his worshipers instead of them carrying him. He exalts himself above all other gods. Then, in Isaiah chapter 46, verse 11, we read, "I am calling a bird of prey from the sunrise, from a distant land the man to carry out my decision. I have spoken, and I will bring it about. I have purposed it, and I will also carry it out." The bird of prey and man from a distant land is Cyrus, who liberated Israel from Babylon, thus carrying out God's decision. So Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 to 11, is not about God revealing a plan gradually, but about a single specific event, the rise of Cyrus to liberate Israel. It's a polemic against idols, not a doctrine of progressive revelation. Next, paragraph 11 goes on to claim that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and others could thus build faith in the promise that the seed would appear in their genealogical line. Referring to Genesis chapter 22, verses 15 to 18, chapter 26, verse 4, and chapter 28, verse 14. The main component of the seed, according to J.W. theology, is, as seen in paragraph 12, the Messiah, or Jesus. However, these Genesis passages are patriarchal promises of land, progeny, and blessing. In the ancient Near Eastern context, this would have resonated as promises of tribal flourishing and survival, not as a coded prophecy about a future Messiah. The emphasis is on Abraham's family line multiplying and becoming a source of blessing to surrounding nations. In the Genesis texts, such as chapter 13, verses 15 to 16, chapter 17, verses 7 to 8, and chapter 22, verses 7 to 18, the word seed, or zerah in Hebrew, is a collective noun. It normally means offspring, plural, that is, Abraham's descendants as a people. In these contexts, almost all scholars agree it is plural, but grammatically, it doesn't distinguish between singular and plural. Just like offspring, in English, it can mean one descendant or many, depending on context. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 16, Paul seizes on the grammatical ambiguity. He argues that seed must really refer to one particular descendant, and he identifies that one as Christ. Now, the promises were spoken to Abraham and to his offspring. It does not say, and to your descendants, in the sense of many. Rather, it says, and to your offspring, in the sense of one, who is Christ. This is a midrashic move, a rabbinic-style interpretation that takes a detail of the wording and invests it with theological weight. He knows seed can be collective, but he insists the singular points prophetically to Christ. In Galatians, Paul's main point is that belonging to God's people does not depend on the Mosaic law, but on faith in Christ. By saying the promises to Abraham were aimed at one seed, Christ, he can argue that anyone who belongs to Christ, Jew or Gentile, is part of that promise. Jehovah's Witnesses follow Paul's line here, saying the seed in the Abrahamic promises must mean Christ, and therefore Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were putting faith in that messianic line. But from a scholarly standpoint, the patriarchs themselves weren't anticipating Christ. The seed meant a great nation. Paul reappropriates it after the fact to make a theological case for Christ. It is possible that Paul could be reading the Abrahamic promises of seed alongside passages like 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 to 14, where offspring clearly refers both to a single descendant, Solomon, and to the Davidic line collectively. But that is speculation, as Paul never cites that text. The problem is that no biblical text directly links the seed of Abraham to the seed of the woman in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, or the woman of Revelation chapter 12. That connection is made only through later theological interpretation. At best, Revelation is retrospectively combining Paul's Christological reading of Abraham's seed with the symbolic woman of Genesis. But the Genesis and Samuel texts themselves are not making that link. Paragraph 11 of chapter 2 then uses Hebrews chapter 11, verses 32 to 38, to argue that persecution in Israel's history is Satan trying to destroy faith in the promised seed. The text lists figures like Gideon, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets. It praises them for faith that led to victories, but also to suffering, torture, mocking, imprisonment, being sawn in two, killed by the sword, destitution, wandering in deserts. The point is, faithful people endured trials because of their trust in God, even though they didn't yet receive the final promise. The Watchtower interpretation is therefore a theological overlay. They retrofit Hebrews chapter 11 into the Genesis chapter 3, verse 15 framework, making persecution about seed warfare, not historical circumstance. In fact, Hebrews itself retrofits Israel's history into a Christ-centered framework. So this JW theology is a second-level retrofit. What we see, then, is not evidence of a consistent, progressive unveiling of the seed through history, but rather later interpreters retroactively connecting diverse passages into a single storyline. The Watchtower is continuing this same process, but with its own doctrinal framework. Next time, we will move on to paragraph 12. Don't forget to check the other resources in the description.